And we're here at the council meeting on October 1st, 7 o'clock. Yours truly forgot to turn on the recorder, so at this point what we've done is call the meeting to order and adopted the agenda, adding an on-table item at number 7-111, Metro Wood Burning Bylaw Update. And the agenda has been adopted as amended. And moving on from there.
Public participation. As I see, we have no one in the gallery this evening to participate publicly. We will move on to the delegation. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. So, I think everything is running okay here. Just make sure. Great. So, good evening. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Darren Hurd. So I'm the Director for Western Canada for SBA Communications. I live here on the North Shore. I've been living in Vancouver for over 30 years and love your community. And I've been working very closely with your staff, Nye and Peter, and your legal counsel to finally be here tonight. It's been a lot of work, but a lot of worthwhile work. And our hopes are to solve a very critical issue for your community, as well as bring a lot of positive benefits to your community, your municipality, and your residents, your businesses at the same time. So I wanted to just quickly run through a little bit on who SBA is, sort of where we came from. I won't bore you too much, hopefully. I'll zip through, and then more importantly, we'll do a Q&A and we'll start discussing the specific project that we're here in your community for, which is why you're all here, and the more important thing to really be hashing out. So let me just get into things. So SBA is founded originally in Boca Raton, Florida. The company has been around for over 30 years. As I mentioned, I'm local, so I live here in Vancouver. My territory is Western Canada. Our Canadian offices are in Montreal. So we have a small Canadian team that is taking care of the whole country. And our corporate head office is actually right in Boca Raton, Florida. I'll actually be going there for the first time this December, which will be great to meet some colleagues. I've been working there 3.5 years and I haven't met sort of probably 80% of my executives, so it'll be nice to have some face time with them. A little quick timeline just on sort of where we came from and where the company's gone, some key milestones. So back in '89, they were really just a consultancy firm down in the States, and then they slowly moved forward and got into ownership of towers around the late 90s. So they went public in '99 and started raising some money and listed on the NASDAQ, and then finally made their very first international expansion in 2009, and that also included Canada. So they kept acquiring towers, and that's exactly what we're continuing to do. Back in 2016, the company actually formally converted its status to a real estate investment trust. So basically we treat our infrastructure, mostly towers, but we also have rooftops, as condos, and we basically treat them as such, and we build them, buy them, rent them, and we fill them up with as many tenants as possible. That gives us that real estate investment trust status, which obviously has implications for taxes too. We were actually upgraded from the NASDAQ to the S&P 500 just a couple of years ago, so it's a big milestone for the company. So basically, as I mentioned, the primary income revenue stream that we are experts in is site leasing. So 94% of everything that comes to our company globally, mostly in North America and South America, is from just leasing out as many pieces of infrastructure with as many tenants as possible. So we're sort of averaging almost 2 overall. Some sites have 5, 6 tenants, some have 1, some few have none. And we're in about 14 markets. And our management's got over 21 years experience, which actually is a coincidence because I have 21 years experience as well. So prior to SBA, I should actually mention I did work for Rogers, Bell, and Telus. So I've been since the late 90s working for all the big telcos. So that's why I'm familiar sort of with their strategies and their business. We now have over 30,000 communication sites. We're predominantly, obviously, present in the United States and South America. And actually, we just very recently made some acquisitions in South Africa. Things are now shifting, as I'm sure a lot of you have heard. Now, back in the day, you used to be able to put a tower up, you could just stick it up on top of a mountain, and it would probably cover off the whole city or a good chunk of it. Now, the high tower way up on a mountain top really is almost a detriment because those can actually block other towers. The signals can actually cancel each other out. And with the usage of smart devices, whether it's tablets, your laptops, your home usage, the technology has to be much, much closer to the user. So we're really looking at a much smaller radius for what a piece of infrastructure can do in the community. Typically, this is what you're looking at. On the left, obviously, is called a monopole. And in the middle is a guide tower that's obviously for a much larger footprint where you'd be in a rural area where you could have large guide wires supporting a much taller, skinnier tower. Then you have a very standard self-support, very practical, very good for multiple tenants. And also, like the monopole, takes up less footage on the ground. For the proposal we have in with your community, we're looking at one of the two, either on the left monopole or self-support. There's benefits to both, but there are some restrictions with monopoles on height as well. They can get to a certain point where it becomes unfeasible to really have that piece of steel too high up in the air. So usually if we're getting higher where we probably are going to be with your community, self-support, where most of it will be hidden away by the trees, will be stable and accommodate as many tenants as possible. But that decision hasn't been completely finalized yet, and we'll be working on those. Little snapshot of where we are, obviously besides Canada, the United States, we're in Argentina, and Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Panama, Peru, and now South Africa. So I'm hoping one day I'll see a good chunk of those, but they haven't offered to fly me anywhere like that yet. Little snapshot of the globe where we are. And this really is just talking to how 2/3 of the world's population are connected. And this is just growing in 100-folds over the years. It used to be back in the day when we would have maybe one device in the house. And we're now looking at people having multiple devices, and, parents and kids with tablets, wireless devices, gaming devices. Now we're getting into home smart monitoring. We're also looking at medical services going into the house. So the technology is just becoming more and more required and part of our day-to-day life and businesses. Our biggest customers in Canada, obviously the big ones that you all recognize, Rogers and Freedom, which is Shaw and Bell and TELUS and Xplornet, but we have all sorts of customers, basically anyone who operates a wireless network, whether it's a small mom and pop internet provider up to the federal government and everyone in between. We're trying to really be the first choice provider for infrastructure. That's our primary business. So we try and bring a lot of benefits to our customers, not just the ones listed on this screen, but we also try and bring speed to market. We are very flexible in our approval processes. We actually have an online portal for self-serve co-location. So if a customer is either on a tower already or wants to be, they can log into the portal. They can set up a profile, and we can then input their requirements, get a price, and if they are comfortable moving forward, we send them an agreement and they sign it, and we arrange for the installation. So it's extremely streamlined and useful for people in the industry because it can be quite onerous, time-consuming, and a lot of times applications to get onto a tower or a rooftop even can just sort of go into a black hole. Like I said, we're still looking at massive growth. So the infrastructure that we're looking at, and not just for your community, but across Canada and the world, really is just going to be growing. Now with 5G coming down the pipe, we're going to be looking at more emphasis on in-built systems, small outdoor DAS systems, distributed antenna systems. We're going to be needing more rooftops, tall, short, more towers, tall, short. So your community obviously is well overdue for decent service, and hopefully we can be the solution to this. As mentioned, we're on the NASDAQ and S&P 500. The stock, by the way, is doing very well. They're, I think, 225 or more US a share. So the company last year made 1.6 billion in revenue, and we're probably going to quite easily beat that this year. So we're been around, going to be around for a long time, and we have financial resources to help out. We own a lot of towers, but how we sort of come about our portfolio primarily is either by working with the big carriers or municipalities such as yourself, where we take a project right out of the gate. So, for instance, Rogers or TELUS or Bell could give us a search map and tell us where they ideally need coverage. And our company is very unique in that service, where we'll actually go out, do the site acquisition, and obtain all the municipal approvals, and we do that for free. If we fail, it's at our cost. There's no liability whatsoever to our client. And with municipalities such as yourself, we come in, we work with your team, your staff, and we research responsible locations where we think we could ideally land on municipal lands, because we want the revenue to go back into your municipality as opposed to just one single private landowner. And then we upload all the capital and we take care of all headaches, and then we market the asset to get as many tenants, and we revenue share with you. So we sort of covered all this. We have coverage on all areas, whether it's rural, highways, it really doesn't matter. Anywhere that service is required, which is almost everywhere now, we're either buying, building new projects, and leasing it out. Some of the key areas, apart from what's up here with compliance and tower maintenance, obviously when we're going through these projects, we deal with all of our environmental issues. Depending on how complicated those get, they can be very expensive, but as part of the due diligence, it's very important. We take care of all Transport Canada and NAV Canada requirements, obviously zoning, but that's a little different when you are the landowner / business partner, and obviously everything is adhered to by the book. In some cases, obviously companies have federal jurisdiction over municipal jurisdiction, and they try to avoid some local zoning, but that's not advisable, and we don't do that. Other things we take care of basically are all the headaches. So once the infrastructure is up, we take care of all installations, we take care of all tower maintenance, day-to-day headaches such as co-location application, debt collection should that be required, additional swaps, changeouts. We prevent creep, which is a common term in the industry where clients will suspiciously have equipment on the tower that wasn't approved and it'll just sort of be there. So we audit on a regular basis to ensure that they're paying for what's been put on, or that what's on there is included in what their agreement is. So that's the quick snapshot of who SBA is and who we are, and more importantly, I'm here to talk about this project, which I'm really excited to be part of, because I've been in the communications industry locally in British Columbia since the late 90s, and Lions Bay has been on the radar more than once, and no one's been successful in improving wireless service in this community for a number of reasons, and this is the furthest I've ever seen it, and I'm sure it is the furthest it ever has gone. And working with Peter and I and your legal team, we've been working behind the scenes to get to here tonight. So very happy personally and professionally to be in front of you and trying to bring this over the finish line for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with questions. Shall we just go this way around the table? Everybody happy with that? Peter?
Yeah, I don't really have much else in the way of questions. The item will come up further in the agenda, where council will consider the report that's on the agenda, and I'll probably just add a couple of comments at that point. So, but councillors, looking ahead to that report and your review of the materials, if there's any questions that you have for Darren, now would be a good time to pose them.
Peter, through the chair, would it make any sense to move that earlier into the agenda? In case
Yeah, we could certainly do that as well. That's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
But nevertheless, I think the question and answer portion of the procedure ought to be at this point.
So Norm, go ahead, you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this, I can't remember the last time this has come up in council in the last 2 years. There's been a lot going on in the background on this file.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago that we
Okay.
put out the RFP
Okay,
and then selected SBA as the best proposal and have been working with them since then to,
okay.
you know, and it's, there's a lot to it, and, you know,
So the
if you-
location's been earmarked, or that's still part of the?
yeah, no, the location is per
Okay.
the report and the draft, or the proposed agreement that's attached to the report in the
So
agenda.
That's,
Just above the Harvey water tank area, there's that laydown area that we had previously talked
Okay.
about potentially using as a place to put the broken up concrete from the old tank. And we didn't do that, we shipped it out. Would have been difficult to use that site for this purpose if we had done that. And the cost of shipping out the broken up concrete was not expensive under the terms of our current project, so.
you're gonna have to forgive me because I'm playing catch for a bit.
Totally
So
fine.
I actually have a lot of questions. Maybe this is good because I'm coming into it a little fresh.
Sure.
And it felt more like a sales pitch, so that caught me off guard. And it felt like SBA was doing us a favor, which also catches me off guard a bit. I didn't realize we had a fundamental problem in the village with reception, so that's also news to me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
So I have no issues.
Then you're lucky.
Yeah, no, and so I'm happy to learn that. I guess I just have a hard time believing that we're the only ones benefiting. I'm sure you guys are benefiting.
Oh, absolutely.
substantially,
Yeah,
right?
no, of course.
Yeah, okay.
So they made 1.6 billion last year.
Yeah, so I'm just I'm trying to piece it together how we're going to benefit from this, or you know, because it just sounded like there was, and I'm not sure who this presentation is tailored to, because it talked about things that I don't think are maybe directly relevant to, like your business case isn't really that relevant to us.
Yeah, and I totally knew that coming in. That's why I wanted to speed through it, because it was
Okay.
just a history of corporately who we are, because a lot of people have never heard the name SBA, and no one really cares who I am. So I just wanted to make sure you had a sense that we weren't some small operation that was fly by night that wasn't going to be here tomorrow.
Right.
The key was to get to the project, and that's really what I wanted to share more information about, was your other options that were on the table prior to this project coming together, how we ended up getting it, and then why us over other options, and what the benefits are to the community.
Okay. So it wouldn't be something, does it have a full life cycle plan at the end of the life of this tower? Who owns the problem? Is there a remediation part of that, or is that, so do we just get left with a chunk of concrete and a big steel frame after 20 years or whatever lifespan that tower has?
No, there's remediation wording in the agreement
Okay.
that talks to should the tower ever come down, which I think we're talking probably 40, 50 plus years from now. I don't see steel not being needed. But what'll happen is it'll need to be maintained, it'll need to be reinforced, and structurally, maybe even extended potentially one day.
Okay.
So there's extensive liability insurance. We've been working with your legal extensively and our legal, and it's taken a long time to ensure your needs are all protected while we protect our typical corporate needs.
And the maintenance is subbed out to some other maintenance company, or do you guys own that maintenance?
We don't have an in-house team in Canada that does that, so we have site managers. We have one for Western Canada and one for Eastern Canada. And their responsibility is to monitor every tower in their territory, but they vendor out the work. So our clients do too. So if a client is needing some changes and there's a structural requirement or an analysis required, the clients are having to pay for that. We do have capital and we do contribute to a lot of day-to-day operation of this deal, but we try and flow through a lot of that to the client.
So is that you pay a service fee for that?
When it's needed, so
Like a
say if
service.
our roads needed to be repaired or upgraded, then we bid out to some vendors as to the extent of that work. We get some quotes, we decide who to award it to. Safety is a huge part of our concern. We're actually a founding member of STAC, which is the STAC Council, which is a National Safety Council for Canada. So the Vice President of SBA Canada, who Peter and I have met before, is a board member of that. So it's pretty serious.
You don't have any partnerships on the maintenance side with the municipality, for example, where you engage their public works to take care of that asset?
We don't, but we can. They just have to be set up as a qualified vendor. So there's a number of criteria. They just have to qualify.
Beyond our capabilities.
It's typically, ideally working with us takes away all requirement for work from at a staff level, at a resource level, or any financial output.
And would you have a guess on how many trips go up to that tower on a, let's say, daily or weekly basis?
Well, initially during construction, we were probably looking at a couple of months, maybe 3 months to get the infrastructure in, and then it'll be tenant dependent. So installation is always sort of the longest process. Once tenants are in and it's operating, unless there's an emergency, I would say maybe every 2-3 months someone may need to go up and do something. Maybe swap out some equipment, powering the antenna, or maybe they want to upgrade the line or whatever it may be. So it's pretty minimal.
Okay.
Yeah.
They generally also have, each tenant will have like a little storage shed or something at the base, around the base of the tower, where they might have a generator, for example, for emergency power, things of that nature, extra supplies, things like that. So that's part of their package when they sublease. But the term of this to a maximum with all of the renewals is 30 years, at which point we may enter into another additional extensions of that or what have you. If it comes to an end and is terminated, there are provisions that the licensee, SBA, is responsible to remove the equipment and restore the site. So.
That's it. That's my question.
The other aspect, I might as well just since we're sort of on that vein a little bit, talk about the land itself. So where we are is, here's where the water tank is, and then so it's this area right here. So it's there's the access road that comes up, and then you come into this site, and this is where we would go. All of this chunk of land right here, all the way up to here, I believe, is all one parcel owned by the municipality. So that's why, it started off, normally I think a lot of times SBA deals in terms of a lease. So with a lease you have an interest in land and you can register it on title. Sub-licensees have an interest through the licensee and that sort of thing. But we couldn't have that because we've got a big chunk of land. So we went with a license agreement. So it's not an interest in land, we're licensing the ability of the licensee, SBA, to have exclusive use of this area for this purpose, and with the acknowledged acceptance, there will be sub-licenses granted by SBA to people like TELUS or Rogers or Shaw or whoever. And that was what, and so getting everybody to wrap their heads around license instead of lease was sort of a process in and of itself that took a while. Because it has taken a long time for us to get to this point. That's in our best interest is to have it set up as a license, and SBA has accepted that, and we worked out all the terms. What does that look like with the respective legal counsels go back and forth?
Very common too for government in general to need licenses over statutory right-of-ways or leases. They just can't do any disposition of land or any grants towards the land.
Anyone else?
I thought we were going this way around.
Yep.
I'll go next then.
Neville.
I had a few similar questions on construction and subsequent installations. So there's no onus on the village at all. You contract that work out to build the tower to to a contractor?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, and then he'll be the prime contractor and take all that liability on?
Yeah, well, we do.
You
but-
take on prime?
Yeah, well, we have sort of umbrella liability, and then they'll have their own liability. So it'll depend, if they do something that's their fault, and they're liable for it, then we'll go after them for that, but we sort of are an umbrella protector. So the village is at no risk legally or on a liability level. I mean, there's actually indemnity wording in the agreement in that respect.
And that's the same for anyone coming to put a box in the tower or whatever.
Yeah, so no one can touch the tower unless we've authorized them as a approved vendor with our company. No one's allowed to climb it, touch it, access it. We're very strict on that.
So one thing that intrigued me when you go through that PowerPoint, there was talk about, as we got more and more technology, it becomes more and more local. And there was a quote there something about nowadays it's 1 mile from the town. Our village is a lot more than 1 mile wide from that point. So do we understand what the coverage will be provided by this tower, or the benefit?
Yeah, well,
Sort of
right
radius
now,
of the tower.
Lions Bay is sort of considered like a pothole of a wireless coverage situation. So if you think of it as a municipal road as a pothole, it's historically been bad, and it's getting worse as your usage and residents increase in the neighborhood. So even if it's okay in some spots, that's going to start to decline over the next few years. People are going to notice that, and people who have poor service already are going to see that increase even worse. So with a piece of infrastructure like this, we're going to have to do some RF propagation, and we're going to probably require our clients to help us with that. So we're going to market obviously to the big telcos, the Rogers, Bell, Telus, Shaw, and we're going to ask them in that process what height do they think they're going to need to get decent coverage into the community, and then we're going to see if we can accommodate that. There is a potential for another piece of infrastructure on the other water reservoir. That's not on the table right now. It was a potential solution because there were two, but we want to start with one and see if we can satisfy the wireless needs with one, which it's all line of sight technology. So the height of the trees is a big factor, the topography is a big factor. We're hoping that a certain spectrum can propagate through trees better than others, and carriers are working with that to not just increase speed of the network, but they're trying to work through buildings and through trees. So it's a really tough question to answer, but it's going to be worked out, and we will know more when we have the project approved and we've worked with the carriers more closely, and then this is sort of over the finish line, and then we can start getting more into the actual RF technology side of it. But it will be significantly better than what you have.
So what does line of sight mean in this case? It's not line of sight to the actual device.
No, so what that means is line of sight to another tower. So typically, unless they're connected by fiber, they have a microwave link. So long fiber runs, when you get into communities like this where you have mountains and high trees and terrain, fiber is usually not feasible to run from a tower like that to several miles down the road or across the water. So they're relying on a microwave shot. So they literally have to line up microwaves and sync them up so that they can communicate. And then they form this cell network. They're all cells and they connect. That's where you get the term from.
Okay. So, I mean, what's your feeling of this tower up there? Is it going to benefit the other side of the community? I mean, is it going to benefit the people who live on the opposite side of the community?
I hope so. That's going to be determined 100% once the clients are installed, and they can then do an actual live test. So they can simulate that with software, but until it's live, they won't know the final outcome. So we will share that obviously with you, and we can also get feedback from the community and your businesses, whether they're satisfied or not. And if there are still demands and there's pockets that are obvious, then we'll work with you to see if it's prudent to maybe put another tower in.
So, Peter, is there anything in the agreement that gives any sort of guarantee of the coverage to the community, that it doesn't just end up being one half of the village, or no?
No,
Well, the scale's a mile there. Maybe that's a mile.
It
covers everything maybe, but except Brunswick Beach. Maybe in my mind.
yeah, I mean, basically what we've got is an agreement which provides them with a year to do all of their due diligence and make sure that everything's going to work out. At which point, they exercise the option to proceed.
Right. I saw that.
And if there are gaps in coverage, as Darren said, then they'll, I presume, work as best they can to try and address those gaps. And if there are gaps that are not addressable, that are substantive, then we would probably come back to that conversation that we started off with, which was to have 2 towers.
There's always a solution. It's just a case of what does it look like. So, do you want one big tower? Do you want multiple short towers? Do you need some short sites to support a large tower? They can do it engineeringly wise. It's just what looks good in your landscape and what's acceptable and what makes sense from an aesthetic perspective and on a business level. So it'll be a massive step in the right direction, and then it'll be interesting they have ways to do simulation propagations where they guesstimate what coverage before and after will look like, and then when it's live, they can actually show you what before and after look like. So that'll be something to maybe take a look at, maybe in about a year or two. We could come back with that data and share it with the community and the staff and council, and you'll be able to see real-time feedback on that.
So you mentioned all the big providers, and you said you can get all sorts of people that want to rent some space in the town. So, but obviously you haven't got any of those agreements in place, because it sounds like your business model is we'll build it and they will come.
It is, but we do have conversations about strategic areas. So I've had conversations with TELUS and Shaw and Rogers, and they've all been interested. I've also worked for TELUS, Bell, and Rogers, and I've been the guy trying to work on the network. So it's always been a checkbox for coverage. It's just never been achievable.
I guess my question, put it in a different way, is there a possibility that one of the big players could grab this tower and then use that as leverage to sell services, and we all have to get tax?
No, this is the thing. See, SBA is a completely neutral third party. Our job is to put the steel in the ground and get as many tenants on there as possible. We can't force them to, but the benefit to them will be as the first piece of infrastructure in this neighborhood in the history of its existence. They could accommodate this technology. So they're probably going to, depending on budget, and top position is always desirable because it's higher. We're going to see a lot of interest in this. So if the big carriers are all on there, then it'll sort of be, it won't matter what service you're on. But if for one of the reasons, if one of them decides they don't have the budget or they don't want to go on the tower, then that'll be a detriment to people who are using their service. So they may want to switch just as we do today. Sometimes you get fed up with your carrier and you switch, or your service is better and you commute to work, so maybe you switch. It'll be sort of a scenario like that. But this is a particularly exciting, historically challenging area, a solution here is going to be good for a lot of people. But there's only so much vertical real estate though, because we can only make the tower so big before it becomes an eyesore, and depending on transport and that Canada restrictions too. Our primary goal will be to fill this tower with the big carriers who provide the services that most people are used to. And we have space on there for the municipality, which is reserved for free. And also there's some equipment for UBC, which is going to be included in that agreement. So if a smaller company approaches us, like a little ISP that's operating on the islands or trying to get up and down here for internet service, if we can accommodate them, we absolutely will. But sometimes we run into a position where it's full.
So the tower I know now you haven't designed it and you've still got a lot of engineering to do, but the tower you envisage will have enough space to incorporate those 5 big players you mentioned. Would you expect all 5 to be here?
I think that just because I've been in the industry for a long time and I've worked for the 3 big ones, I suspect Rogers and Shaw, who are Freedom, will be the first to sign up because they're very cooperative nationally, on third-party infrastructure. TELUS is a little more old school. They are on our infrastructure, but they tend to like to own their own infrastructure a little bit more than the other carriers. They just have an old school mentality about we want to put it in and we want to have full control of it. We don't want anyone to be on the tower besides us, and we want to have competitive advantage, and we, all the sort of reasons that are becoming a bit more obsolete as we move forward in technology. Sharing is very much encouraged by ISED, which is Industry Canada, and the reduction of the proliferation of towers is the #1 target, not increasing the amount of competitive towers and then being an aesthetic detriment to the skyline.
And that was one of the reasons why SBA was the preferred client or preferred choice in the RFP, is that they could co-locate a variety of vendors rather than having different companies approach us for single towers with their infrastructure only.
You can imagine as a councillor or a mayor being in a room making a decision on a tower and it's just TELUS or it's just Rogers. And you are in a position where you're having to approve a project which may seem biased. People may say, well, why did you allow TELUS and why did you let Rogers do it historically, or vice versa? Or, why can't they cooperate and do everything together? And so that's why we succeed in what we do. We bring everyone to the table, we make them all cooperate, and then we revenue share. So.
Okay. Because TELUS and Bell typically share quite a bit.
Yeah, they do. So we call them Bellis. What they did was they were behind on the spectrum technology. So it was sort of like the old VHS beta days and Blu-ray DVD. People were running and we weren't sure which way it was going to go. And Rogers had GSM technology, which was more of the international global standard, and that's why Rogers came to Canada first with the iPhones, which was a huge competitive advantage. Their stock went through the roof and they got a huge client base spike because of it. TELUS and Bell were kind of left with CDMA technology and they said, look, we need to basically build out the network to GSM, so we should just cooperate. You build out the east, we build out the west. So TELUS is doing the west, Bell's doing the east. Let's pool our money. They did it twice as fast and twice as cheap. And now they share. So everything TELUS builds in the west, Bell customers are roaming on that, and vice versa in the east. They're slowly getting more competitive, but that's been in place for quite a long time now. So really the only independents are Rogers and Shaw owns Freedom. So it's really Rogers, Shaw, and TELUS.
Right. So do you think TELUS and Bell will play ball or not?
TELUS is going to be very interested in this location. I've been in this scenario in other areas in Canada where they said they're excited, they say they want it, but they drag their feet. And I don't know who makes those decisions. If it's a CEO level budget thing, or they just ultimately get frustrated because someone else succeeded and they didn't. I don't know for sure. But by the time in projects like this, they come to the table, if their competitor is savvy as they are proving to be, like the Rogers and the Shaws, I'll probably, if I phone them up and said, we got the green light, are you in? They'll say yes. And by the time TELUS comes along, they're going to be the third person on the tower, which means they'll be lower. They don't have a lot of solutions to besides a tower to cover off your neighborhood. TELUS has a unique situation in British Columbia where they own legacy telephone poles from the old telephone eras, and they own thousands and thousands and thousands of them. Some of them are joint with Hydro, BC Hydro. A lot of them are just TELUS poles, and you'll see them dotted all through every municipality in British Columbia. And they're using those to put small cell technology on. And they'll just slap up some antenna and they own them. They don't have to consult with the municipality. They don't have to get any approvals. They don't have to do public consultation. It's been a little contentious in some places, and it's probably going to be kind of like the Hydro smart meter issue where people got nervous about smart meters on their houses and Hydro was doing it without their approval or knowledge. TELUS is using that, but they're allowed to. They're not doing anything illegal. It's just a case of how transparent should you be, and obviously we believe in full transparency because you don't want surprises.
When you say poles, you actually mean poles, not
wooden
towers.
poles, no wooden poles, short wooden poles.
No.
Yeah, so we have we pull data nationally on all the carriers across Canada, and I can pull up municipalities, and I can show you dozens of these little sites have popped up, like up in Lynn Valley. They've done them in Richmond. They've done them almost every major municipality. It's just you just all of a sudden see a splash of 50, 60, 80, 100 new sites, and then you go down to Google Earth level, and it's just a wood pole.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people don't know about it, even including mayors and councillors. So and the residents sure don't. So it's improving coverage, but it's also potentially going to annoy people if they haven't
Hasn't
been
Shaw
informed.
done the same thing through its own customer base?
It's a little different. So Shaw has a lot of fiber in the ground, and they have TV, and they
Mhm.
have a lot of Wi-Fi. So they don't actually own physical poles like TELUS does. So they're going to have to put that equipment on buildings or build small poles or use maybe municipal lighting or traffic lights and things like that. So will Rogers. Rogers has nothing. They don't really even have the fiber. That's why they don't have TV out here. They sold a lot of it to Shaw. So now they're putting budget into fiber. So, yeah.
Wow. Getting a real education here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, certainly. I'm in education. We went around for the previous go round. It was really nice.
Yeah, well, and just the whole way it all works, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's a small niche of people in the industry who have been around for a long time. We sort of see each other pop up in different places.
And I recall that something in Lynn Valley when all of those cell towers were popping up on, that their residents were not pleased, vocally not pleased with that. So that's interesting.
I met with the former mayor, Mayor Little, and had a chance to talk to him about communications in the district of North Van, and he had no idea that that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So the head of planning had a concept that some things were going on like that, but it had never come to a sort of full permission, a full public engagement or anything like that.
Yeah.
So
Are you, Neville, you,
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in the green when we get to them.
okay. Nye?
Nope, I'm good.
Fred?
Yeah, I've been watching this for a while. Don't know all the details, and quite frankly, you guys would worry about the details. I'm just kind of wondering, when is it, the first poll going live?
well, tonight was a big milestone because we were hoping that this would be the formal approval to have staff work with SBA to go to public consultation. So we would then, the public consultation process would be quite a bit above and beyond what the standard federal policy is. So for municipalities that don't have a policy, such as Lions Bay, they lay out a mail-out radius of 3 times the tower height, which in this case would probably be nobody. Then they require an ad in a newspaper for a couple of weeks, and no public consultation. So, working with you, especially as being a landlord, we've agreed to do a lot more than that because we want to be more transparent. So we're going to work with staff to figure out a responsible mail-out notification group. We'll get the addresses from staff to do that. We'll also hold an open house, and I'd like to do a public information session so they can walk through and learn about the project and get relevant information on the technology and the federal government and how it all works and who we are. So it'll be quite a bit beyond what we're required to do, but it's that's what we do.
So what sort of timeline then would you end
So
up?
I would say public consultation, we could start probably this fall, and now it's just the beginning of October, so if we could get things kicked off November, December, that would be great. We would then have that run through till early spring. It would probably, we'd have to gather Q&A from the community, we'd have to answer them. We have to report all that back to Industry Canada, who's now called ISED. And we would then ask for your concurrence formally, as in the municipality, but because you're a landowner, it's unlikely you're going to say no, because the whole point of the project was to solve the problem together. And you would say concurrence granted, the public consultation was completed satisfactorily, we would share that with the federal government, and we would be given the green light to put a shovel in the ground. So all going well, we should be able to start construction next spring. Would be great, maybe early summer, ideally when weather's good. And then we would have our tenants ideally install in parallel, or as soon as the tower's in the ground, it's vertical, we can start stacking. So it would probably be in that timeline.
Okay.
Yeah, this time next year, everything should be up and running, and there should be at least, I would say, a couple tenants on there, so with plans for more.
And we have the, I forgot the terms, I was gonna use it, monitoring system on our water tanks and stuff.
SCADA.
SCADA, thank you.
Yeah.
That would be up and running then too?
It's up and running now, it won't be part of the cell tower.
Oh, I thought that was part of the reason for the cell tower.
Originally, it was one of the options, but we had a ComDuer report that went to council that said that we would be using cellular or landlines. So we would, for our technology, we would sub to Rogers, TELUS, any of the Wi-Fi companies for a particular station and pay the monthly fee for that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for us to build a SCADA system and house it on the tower is capital intensive and cost prohibitive.
Okay, I guess I missed that one then. Okay,
I can send you the report.
I've probably read it and forgot it. Too many details. One detail I did see in here that gives me comfort, and that's the legal considerations that you've been vetted all the way along through this thing. It sounds like everything's exposed, there's nothing to be concerned about. Quite comfortable. Oh, the other thing I was wondering about, when we put a tower, cell tower in here, I know there's some people in the community are concerned about cell, I don't know if you call it radiation or radio waves or
Yeah.
whatever.
Radio emissions and
Do you address that in the public consultation?
yeah, we do. So we're a little unique because we're not providing that service. So if we were a big carrier, we would explain to them how we're regulated for those technologies by the federal government. So what we do in the open house is explain that we're putting the infrastructure in, but our tenants are regulated, and here's how they're regulated. So we have information there for people, for Health Canada, Safety Code 6. That's the federal guideline that they all have to adhere to. They're not allowed to turn on a site unless the federal government, Safety Code 6, has said you meet or are well below the criteria. The carriers on a tower are typically operating hundreds, if not thousands of times below the requirements set out by those standards. Canada's good. They're really strict. There are countries in the world that I think are even more stringent, but overall Canada's very strict about that for good reasons. We're Canada. But so we basically just guide them to where they can get more information. We can talk to it, but we do steer them to the experts who regulate that.
Thanks.
There's a few references in the agreement to Safety Code 6 and their requirements to comply with those regulations. So those are all covered off too.
True confessions, I haven't read every word in the agreement.
I don't blame you, it's a long agreement. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm done, thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, so, I mean, so there's no permitting process for putting one of these towers up
Well, that's a good question. So they're technically, on a federal level, if a carrier was coming into the community, they could say that they are exempt from building permit process. But that's been a bone of contention over the last 20-odd years because the city said, well, we don't agree with that interpretation, and then they get into sort of a strained relationship and a bit of a fight. So out of relations, and I've seen the carriers be a lot more cooperative as the years have gone by. So when I was at Rogers, that was where I was prior to being with SBA. We went in and we just said, what do you require? We would gladly apply for permits. So SBA does the same thing. We come in, and obviously as a landlord, you have a different leverage because we're not just coming in asking you to do things and you have to get regular approvals. We want to ensure that your permit process is adhered to and that you're satisfied that everything's going in as to engineered standards.
I wasn't so much thinking of our building permit process. I thought maybe there was, when I did the public consultation, I was thinking there was some sort of provincial, federal permit process that you had to engage outside of our community, so there isn't anything like that.
No, it's specific to what your building permit process is. So we would come in, typically we come in with a full set of construction drawings and letters of assurance for contractors. And we go through your permit approval process and we pay your permit fees and get that all signed and sealed and delivered. We recently went through that with Maple Ridge. They were very similar. We did an RFP, we won the RFP. We had the right to build 2 towers in their community, we've already built 1. And we went through the full permit process with them.
Okay. Pam? No questions. And then my only question would be, it's well out of the general vision of this residence, like it's way up there.
Yes, there's really 2 ways that they've looked at solving this solution historically. It was a lot, RF engineers sort of wanted to be down in the water historically when I worked for the carriers, shooting up into the residence. But obviously, everyone looking down is going to be seeing a big piece of steel. So even though an RF engineer may want that, it's probably not the smartest solution,
Yeah.
especially in such a beautiful neighborhood. So the best, most responsible solution is up the hill, shooting down. And obviously trees are a natural stealth. You'll see something popping out of the trees because you have to, but a good chunk of the tower will be concealed in the trees. And then they paint them green.
So yeah, if anybody was like in Southern California, they camouflage them like palm trees or
Yeah, monopalms.
the northern,
yeah.
they kind of,
They do monopine,
Yeah,
monopalms,
that's
cactus.
yeah, that's,
So,
I've seen those
yeah,
too.
yeah. Monopines, we actually did one out in Mission. We're not proud of it. It's kind of referred to as the toilet brush. So we like to call it a pipe cleaner, but they wanted it really badly, but it didn't make any sense because there were no other trees around it, and it looks fake. These trees vary in appearance, and ultimately, in windstorms, those branches can be subject to damage.
Yeah, okay.
So you're much better off sticking with good old steel.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, if nobody else has any questions, twe very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Nye, for all the work.
And then, are we
Should we
move
shuffle
this forward?
this?
If you want to hang around, Darren, and listen
Absolutely, I
to
don't mind. I have nowhere to go, so.
Okay, so Peter, do you want to lead me through here? What we're gonna,
So I think you just asked for a motion to move item 8A forward on the agenda to be heard after the delegation.
okay, can I get a motion to move item 8A forward to just after the delegation?
Fred had his hand up, he said yes.
Second.
And I'll second it.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Call the question.
So is everybody in agreement? All in favor? Excellent. Carry on.
Okay. So, turning to the report that's in the agenda at page 41 of 148. I do have a slight amendment to the wording of the recommended, the first paragraph of the recommendation, adding a phrase to it. So right now it reads that council approved the telecommunications tower option and license agreement, subject only to issues that arise out of the consultation process. And I'd like to add, and any requisite provincial approvals related to a small portion of the access road, because we don't quite have that in hand yet. It may be that we don't end up needing anything in particular, but we want to cover that off, and we haven't got that wrapped up yet. So, as set out in the report, we've been at this for a while, and feel that we've got an agreement worked out that provides a lot of benefit to Lions Bay, to the residents, as well provides a stream of revenue to the municipality. And in terms of that, sort of some of the key highlights, I'll just go through. quickly. So SBA is the licensee, and they've got a one-year option period to do what they need to do to make sure that it's all going to work out. They're paying $10,000 for that right, and then if they exercise the option, then they get a credit back of 25% of that at the beginning of the initial term. There's a basic license fee of $1,400 a month that SBA pays, and there's a built-in annual inflation increase of 3% a year, or the average that's paid, average increase that's paid by the sub-licensees on the tower, whichever is greater. There's also a percentage fee of 20% in respect of co-location fees, and co-locations are simply the sub-licensees who are on the tower, like TELUS and Bell and Rogers and so forth. So we get 20% of those after the first sub-licensee. So SBA gets the revenue from the first, the party in the first position, and that's partly in consideration of their business risk in building the tower and pursuing the sub-licensees. We get 20% of all those that follow. The initial period is the initial term is for a period of 5 years, and there's an option to renew for 5 consecutive or 5 times after that, so for a total of 30 years. After which time the agreement technically terminates, but we can enter into further negotiations if it's still a viable tower at that point. The municipality is provided with free space on the tower for equipment belonging to itself or to belonging to UBC for watershed research, or any emergency provider, agency, or dispatcher authorized by the municipality. For the most part, those emergency service providers are already utilizing the services of, people like Ecom, for example. Ecom is a client of SBA, so they might want to put something on the tower, but they would go through SBA as a client, and we would get a share of the revenue. But if there are other things that, for example, Fred, the SCADA thing, if there was anything like that that came up that we needed to, or it was beneficial to us, or we could make a business case for putting some equipment on the tower, then we would have the right to do that. It's provided for. We've talked a little bit about liability insurance, indemnifications, and so forth, and that's all been reviewed extensively by the lawyers on both sides. Access is via the Harvey Intake Access Road, and as noted, we'll be trying to wrap that up with the province in terms of, there's a little tiny portion when you get just up here, it just kind of goes over the line and then back into that spot. So we just have to deal with that. And so the options are to approve the recommendations, and that's the preferred option. A second option would be to seek amendments to the agreement or the consultation process, and I think that the agreement itself is as good as we're going to get it. I think we've got a good agreement, and I think it's a win-win for everyone, to be honest. The consultation process is a bit malleable, and you've heard Darren from SBA talk about their willingness to go over and above and work with us on achieving a level of community consultation which is over and above what's required by law, but which resonates with the community. It's open and transparent, and as long as it's reasonable for them to undertake, and we're going to work together on that is the plan. In terms of some of the other benefits that we haven't talked about, as report notes, this ticks off some items on our OCP, and the goals related to watershed protection, which relates back to the UBC study. Communications technology, which helps support the creation of alternative employment opportunities. So the ability to work from home and have home-based businesses is enhanced through this opportunity. And public safety is also enhanced, which will assist us in terms of our ability to deliver the emergency notification system, LB Alert, through emails and text messaging. So it addresses a number of key objectives on Council's 2019 Strategic Priorities Plan as well. And from the financial considerations, there's the $10,000 up front for the option, less than $2,500 if exercised, $16,800 per year in basic license fee, plus the inflation rider. And that's, equivalent to about a 1% tax increase if you want to look at it in those terms. Additional revenues from the percentage license fees. Hard to say because we don't know at this point who's going to be on and how many, but maybe a rough estimate might be somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 to 8,000. Maybe a little better, but being conservative, that's
Per month or per year?
per annum. Yeah. Legal wise, we're covered off, and communication wise, we would work with the licensee to ensure consultation meets the objectives set out above.
Okay, can I get a motion from Fred, second? Neville? Discussion? Shall we start with this way, Pat? Fred?
No, I think I've said enough, yeah.
I'm good, thanks.
Neville?
So what's the typical fee we would expect? What would you think you were going to get from the first guy?
So we tend to inventory their needs first. So they will input how many antenna supporting radios they need, how much space they need. We can average out because we deal with them all across Canada and guesstimate. But I would say conservative, 15,000 a year. We could probably see them in the 20,000 range. If they had a full sector, fully 3-sector site, typically they have 3 sectors on a tower.
Okay.
So I think
So
it's pretty safe to say.
So from my I'm just doing some maths. So if you only manage to get one guy, basically you don't make enough money to pay us, so you clearly motivate us to make sure you're
That's true. If we get one tenant paying less than the ground,
then we take in 80% of it and we're doing very well.
we would be in trouble.
Okay.
We would never recover our capital.
We wouldn't get your capital back. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. The option. So is that purely at SBA's discretion?
No,
The option to
basically
extend to up to 30 years.
the option would basically they would immediately pay the $10,000.
I know,
to have it.
not $2,000 back. I mean the option to keep extending every 5 years up to 30.
The renewals.
The renewals.
Yeah, so the renewals are at their option if they want to continue on, and our right of termination I think doesn't kick in until there's been at least 2 terms. I forget exactly, but they it's structured so that they can at least make their money back before we have it. If something happened and the community said, put a whole slew of townhouses up there or something like that, then
Okay.
we would have a discussion with them, but we couldn't have that discussion until after at least 10 years.
Okay, so it's
10 or
not the 30
15,
years.
whatever it
What I was
is.
getting at, it's not 30 years. It was before we ever actually.
No.
terminated.
Let's see if I can find that if you like.
I think it was a minimum 10.
Yeah, 10 sticks in my
There
head.
was a similar
for some
provision with
reason.
Maple Ridge, where we wanted to make sure there wasn't a change right after 1 year.
So it's a 1-year notice provision for termination by us. There's earlier termination periods if they were in default on important the obligations, etc. But or became insolvent or whatever, but,
I think if you look under 7.1, it might only be 5 years.
what you looking at here?
7.1 under term.
Upon 12 months written notice, the licensee provided that at least one renewal term has occurred, so I would put it at 10 years.
Okay, 13, okay.
That's 17.1B.
And I guess my last question, 3.4 talks about portion of structures for village equipment, the mutual agreeable locations and structures suitable for the purpose of efficient operation of such equipment. What are these? What are we talking about? 3.4 here, sorry.
3.4?
Yeah, what are we, I couldn't quite get this one. What are we talking about? What is this mutual or village equipment?
So 3.4 provides us with the right to have space on the tower.
It's our right space, okay.
As part of that right, there is, so each co-location sub-licensee who comes along has to sign an ASA, which stands for Antenna
Antenna site agreement.
Site Agreement.
Okay.
So that's attached to, as a schedule to the agreement here. And so we also would sign a version of the Antenna Site Agreement, very similar to the standard form, a couple of minor tweaks for us as the landlord. But that basically provides, it provides a SBA with the consistency of us also having the obligations to provide them with the information that about our equipment, about what frequencies or bandwidths we require, to make sure that there's no conflict between various tenants on the site. And then we have similar obligations in terms of our ability to access the structure. We wouldn't do that ourselves. We would hire people who are,
Okay, I just wanted to clear, so this is our obligation to our equipment we put on their tower.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's the point I'm saying. Okay, I'm good.
No,
Just to understand, so how many customers would this tower service?
potential customers.
I don't know how many people in Lions Bay have devices, what networks they're on. The intent is to cover off as many wireless subscribers as possible. It's a
So the whole
tough,
village would be the maximum,
yeah.
or anyone traveling through?
Passing through on the highway, there would be continuous coverage as a benefit as well.
When we did put this out in 2017, we had quite a bit of positive feedback from residents. There were quite a few people who were complaining about lack of cell signal within homes. And even at the infrastructure committee, there was broad support.
Well, no, I think it makes sense technically. I'm just trying to understand how much revenue this tower generates, and is, $1,400 a month, is that a reasonable license fee? I mean, have we checked the value of that? Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yeah.
Or do we have?
Yeah, and checked with other municipalities and spoke with staff at other municipalities about their experiences in dealing with SBA and in terms of what kinds of revenues are suitable or reasonable. There's a committee that's part of Metro, I think, that also meets and discusses things. So I picked up bits and pieces of information from various different sources to give me a sense of what was reasonable, and then they didn't cave on their side, but we eventually came to terms that were in line with what had been obtained by other municipalities, like Maple Ridge as an example.
So we'd be stuck with this $1,400 a month upon every renewal? All we get is a 3% increase every year. That's sort of there'd never be a renegotiation of that.
And
fee.
20% of any additional revenue they generate.
Yeah,
Top of the
the 3% increase per annum,
Mhm.
at least. It might be higher depending on what the increases are for the tenants. But yeah, compounded, that's going to add up over time.
Yeah, but we also get 20% of any additional revenue they make.
Yes.
Yes. So
Yeah,
if they
after,
got-
after the first
after
10.
the first 10, so if they've got 6 providers, we're getting 20% of the next 5.
Correct.
Okay. Well then, I'm good, thank you. I guess we shall put, the motion is that council approve the telecommunications tower option and license agreement, subject only to any issues that arise out of the consultation process and any requisite approval.
Provincial approvals related to a small portion of the access road.
Thank you, Peter.
And then there's paragraph 2 and 3.
That staff be directed to work with SBA to help coordinate the fulfillment of the consultation process by SBA in accordance with federal regulations and the additional steps to be taken by SBA as outlined in the draft public consultation reference document, attachment 2, and that staff bring a report back to council in due course outlining the results of the consultation process. Can I get a show of support or all in favor? And the motion is passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Look forward to working with you and the community and your staff. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be a huge milestone.
So the internet technically in my house could speed up
Wirelessly.
wirelessly, then my children will be very happy. They only have a year to wait.
Tell them.
I'll go home and tell them the good news.
Guess what Mum did?
Patience is a virtue.
Tablets for everyone.
Appreciate it. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Talk to you soon. Good night.
You bet.
Okay, moving on then to the review and approval of the minutes of September 17th. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes
As amended.
as amended?
Sorry, as
Oh,
amended?
sorry.
No, as circulated.
Agenda, I'm thinking, sorry.
Sorry.
Pardon me.
It's as circulated.
In your
and then-
lane, Nye, in your lane.
Yeah. Done.
Is that a motion, Norm? Thank you. Thank you, Neville. Discussion.
Yes.
Let's start with the A's, shall we?
Thought you were doing the round the table thing.
Oh, we're mixing it up. We're doing things a little differently this time.
And item 7B. The way the sort of first paragraph was worded, maybe it's matters arising up, but I thought there was kind of 3 common themes that kind of seemed to be near and dear to most people. I thought they could do with being kind of minuted. What I had in mind was there was a desire that the fee structure be appropriate to the cost and the staff time, which was Fred's kind of point.
Mhm.
There was certainly one of delegation of authority, and that the council felt the authority should stay with council. I think that was agreed, and that was an important one.
But I think that there was discussion regarding that council ought to have a role in that, but I think that there will be necessarily some delegation within the policy, but certainly it was discussed that there was commentary on having council remain part of the approval process.
Yes, I think that was certainly, I had that opinion. The mayor, the regular mayor, had made the same statement. So I thought that was something that I thought could do with being recorded in the minutes, that it didn't lose. I think that was a key part.
And you said there was a third?
And the third one was further public participation happen soon after the draft, but certainly not. I mean, there was definitely a desire that further public consultation.
Right, after a draft had been brought forward and council discussed it and then put that out to the public for feedback.
Yeah, I think that was a key one. I think most people.
Mhm.
So those are the 3 things I thought there was if there was some guidance given, I thought it was those three things. And there was lots of other discussion.
So if we amended that to, so that, because it's really just sort of the summary information in the paragraph,
Paragraph above,
we could
yes.
just add that there were three themes that emerged were
Yes.
fee structure should reflect staff time and yeah, if anything, at the higher end of the spectrum, I think was said. Delegation of authority should be restricted to the extent that council wishes to maintain a role in the approval process as part of the draft policy to be brought back for discussion, and that public participation, or that the public be canvassed for feedback after the draft policy has been brought back and council has opined on it. We'll just add that to the summary paragraph?
Yep, that's all.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Thank you.
Anything else? Councillor Abbott?
No.
All right, I guess that would put us with Baines.
Yeah, I have one, what number is it? Well, it's on page 36 of 148. Down about the recommendation to council from September 16th infrastructure committee meeting. I was kind of expecting to see the recommendation put in the minutes. Would that not be appropriate, or?
I forget exactly why that didn't go in.
I think you usually do, don't you?
Mm-hmm. We usually do.
Yeah. I don't have a copy of it with me. Do you?
No,
Um,
and I would have to empty this thing out just 2 days ago.
It may be because we didn't nail this down at this point in the meeting. Because what happened was, as it references, costs will be discussed further in close. We kind of talked about it initially, and then we deferred it until after closed. We dealt with it in closed, and then when we came out of closed, we reported more or less in
It's recorded in
in this summary way. Actually, what does it say? We came out of closed.
It is recorded in the closed section.
Hmm?
It is in the closed section.
Yeah,
And it's in reporting out. You report out without the numbers, and in the closed section, the numbers are there.
Well, it's reported in the reporting out in a very summary way. It's not the word for word. But you're referencing something else.
Number C in the closed section.
No, it's
7C. Bottom of the page, 7C.
sorry?
7C, the bottom
Oh,
of the,
7C.
yeah, bottom of that page.
Yeah, but that we can't report that out.
No.
So the reporting out was a summary of what was to be done without discussing the price for doing it.
Typically, what we do is we include the IC recommendation verbatim
Okay.
in the minutes.
Yeah,
And I
and we
think
didn't
that's
do
what-
that. We didn't do that. That's what you're referencing.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I'm just not sure exactly why, other than we kicked it to close and then we came out and that's what we did.
And then it was midnight?
But for reference, it should be in the agenda package for that meeting.
Oh yeah, it'll be in the on-table items because it came on table.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because it was on the night before.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. but it will be on the, it'll be an on-table addition to the agenda materials online on our website
So you can cut and
when
paste it.
the minutes are in there.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, without having it here in front of us, I'm not sure we can just simply adopt it unless we do so.
You look it up.
I'm gonna try.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be such a bother.
That's okay.
Maybe while Niall's doing that, Norm, do you have any?
Nope.
You're good, okay.
I'm curious though, is it for, what's the purpose behind putting the exact wording of the IC recommendation in these minutes? I'm just curious.
Well, it's something that occurred to me that we typically did, and I
Okay.
was curious why it wasn't done this time.
Hmm.
But I think for the casual reader of the minutes, it would make it easier for them, I suppose.
Is this yours? It's not connected to the drive.
Oh,
No, I think it's a good idea to have it in there
it's
because it is
Robert and
contentious.
Dave's.
The third option is a
Yeah.
contentious
Ah.
option.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's not mine, so I can't. I don't know how to do that.
Do we make the change then and bring the minutes back to the next meeting to be adopted? Like if we don't have the exact wording, we want to make that
Yeah,
change.
yeah, we
Oh,
should
sorry.
do.
Hang on, I got it.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So where would it be on the drive? Under
Under
the council minute?
admin, committees, infrastructure committee, meetings, 2019.
Oh, sir.
So this was from, oh, are those windows still open? Are those windows still open?
They would have not been closing now unless. Encourage speed. Get hot, go fast.
I would get sleepy.
I'm afraid if I don't do it now, I'll forget.
Can we not just add it to the action to do list and bring it to the next meeting?
Yeah, that's the thing.
You agree? We have some agreement on that
Yes.
matter here. So how would we do that then?
Just 1 second.
Convince Peter.
Otherwise, it'll be in council, tonight's meeting, on table, folder. Sorry,
That's where,
should have said that before.
I should have thought
No,
of
it was
that.
on the table, the infrastructure committee.
No, but it would have, it was brought on table at the council meeting as well, so Sean Olive copied it in that folder.
So the notes from this meeting could show that there are true requests for amendments to the minutes and that the adoption of the minutes be deferred until the next meeting.
Unless he finds them in 2 seconds.
TikTok, Peter, TikTok.
I like that plan. And funny. Even and funny.
Realized I forgot the water.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure. Any one of us could have got up and got
Yeah.
the order, but thank
No,
you in the
instead of
same.
just sitting here watching you carry it all in.
I think,
I think
why don't we
we'll-
just bring it to the next
Yes.
meeting?
Okay,
Yeah.
so we will defer the adoption of the minutes of September 17th council meeting till next council. All in agreement? All right, we carry on. Next, business arising from the minutes. Anyone?
I had just one.
Thank you,
I'm
Norm.
not sure how to phrase this, but in our initial motion to look into the EV charging, it was actually left with staff to pick a location. So while staff had identified 3 locations in the last meeting, we took that off our unfinished business table. We do have to pick one to move this forward. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because there is quite a timeline associated with permitting and working with VC Hydro and working through the grants, and we just gotta start checking some of these like unknowns off and start at the end. So picking the location is quite crucial.
What about, because the infrastructure committee is working on potential parameters for terms of reference and including operational considerations, maintenance, all kinds of different things that were discussed at the last meeting. What if any of those considerations have an impact on location? It may be preliminary
it's-
to choose the location ahead of figuring that out.
We basically know that the 3 locations will support design. So what we need to do, and talking to BC Hydro, is we need to have a design that we can submit.
Yeah.
And at that point, when we have that design ready for submission, we can select a site. If it's a typical layout,
Yeah, okay. So, all right,
I don't know.
I mean, it could be done the other way. We
Yeah.
could pick a site first,
yeah.
but I'm
Each site will
not
have its
sure.
own sort of civil challenges, so the design, it's a bit of a catch-22.
Yeah.
And I feel quite strongly that we do just have to pick a location and then push this bull ahead.
So the 3 sites that are selected have poles adjacent to them directly. So civil costs are gonna be quite low. There's
Okay.
not a lot of public works. The only one that does have a bit of an issue is the map kiosk. It just means that the wires have to go underground across the driveway. But otherwise, it's all our land, it's all right there, within 20 feet of a pole.
I mean, council could have a discussion on the relative merits of the locations, subject
we
to
did.
any,
We did, or did we only do it in the infrastructure meeting?
Well, the infrastructure committee was pretty clear on what the location they preferred.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave it to we didn't word the motion in any way to give that authority to the infrastructure committee. That wasn't part of their decision to make. But I think the input's important to have. So maybe with that input, staff could pick a location, because I do think that is really in your purview to pick that spot. There'll be things that you know about the location.
well, I think staff would make a recommendation as between the
council.
3, we'd make a recommendation as to, you know, all other things being equal, i.e. no issues in relation to the operational requirements, then we would make a recommendation for one of those locations,
Okay.
and council would say resolved, or whatever,
Okay.
so.
So do we do that? Can we do that here and today, or do we leave that for the next meeting when we've got a full table?
I don't know that we're under the gun to do that yet, and I don't know how quickly the committee may develop ideas or come up with terms of reference or matters that may or may not affect that decision. But I think that perhaps I can't see any harm in pushing it off to the next meeting at least.
Okay. That's fair.
And that way we can have it as a topic on the agenda specifically and word a resolution for consideration at that point, and maybe check in with the infrastructure committee, or I guess the next infrastructure committee meeting isn't until November
Yeah,
4th or whatever it is.
I think, so this just comes from a concern about the grant application deadline, which last year was in May. Was it
Mhm.
May?
Yeah,
Third
Jim,
week of
that
May?
grant hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
I've been looking, so,
So
yeah.
if it does, and if the timing's the same, if we work backwards from May, we're
Yeah.
already into October, it's a very tight timeline.
Yeah.
To get BC Hydro engagement and get a design flushed out, find a vendor. There are definitely some challenges there with the timeline. So that's kind of just my gut feeling is that we need to sort of commit to a location and then start advancing that, because it might come out in November, the grant,
Right.
and then we gotta get ourselves organized
Yeah.
really quickly. So,
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we'll have it as an agenda item next meeting.
All right, excellent. And moving on to unfinished business. We have,
So the first one, 104. Nothing to report at this point. 105, Mr. Jaffer.
So we are still working on this. We've got several issues we need to work out and information we need to get. I will start off by saying that this is not just for home dialysis. The original letter was for medical conditions, of which dialysis was an example. I did speak to Burnaby, who initiated this program. There are things internally that we need to work out, such as how to determine need in a community, and how to communicate with those residents that are affected. The cost per lift, there will be a cost through our service provider to tip each container. Burnaby uses mechanical trucks with hydraulic lifting arms to lift these containers. If they can't lift, or if they can't use that kind of truck here, we may have to reduce the size of the containers, but just provide them more, and so they would be containers that a man could lift and tip into a truck. And then we need to come up with a policy that talks about the rules, the criteria for becoming selected for this, or for removal of a person off of that for abuse or whatever else. So it'll be coming to council in due time, I would suspect, once we get this ironed out.
all right, thank you.
I have a question, if I could. The containers that they're taking, dumping the stuff from, are they quite safe? Like, what I'm trying to say is, if you're using dialysis and other sort of things like that, I imagine there's going to be a lot of needles and whatnot. Do they take precautions to make sure that nothing's going to end up on the
Sharps.
street?
Yeah, so the material that's contained in the containers are not part of the hazardous waste criterion, so there won't be sharps. It'll be tubing, package wrapping, that sort of stuff. The container, the garbage container, is a typical 240-liter tote. So it's wheeled and it's got a lid that you can actually affix a strap to close it down.
Okay.
Excellent, okay, I cannot speak for Mayor McLaughlin on
I can.
106, can you?
Yeah,
Thank you, Peter.
it's done.
Okay, excellent, strike,
107 is done.
excellent. 108,
108, I believe is more or less done. Pam emailed Ingrid Ray, who initiated the request, and she acknowledged that, and I think she's handed it off to John Poville.
She's away.
excellent.
So they know they have the hall. I think now it's just a matter of trying to organize it and get candidates to come, so.
Okay,
Is it a date set?
No, not that we're aware of.
Yeah.
22nd? Sorry.
109 is done. It's on this agenda in the correspondence section. 110 is done. I emailed with the resident who had sent the correspondence, and I also have sent a letter to the property owner in respect of the complaint. And then 111 is the addition to the agenda regarding the Metro wood burning bylaw update. So that was handed out at the beginning of the meeting, and the person that we've normally been dealing with on this, Roger Kwan at Metro, is away, and Lizette Lee responded in his place and indicated that they're working through the proposed bylaw and received the request in May from Lions Bay for an exemption from the proposed wood burning restrictions, and they anticipate continuing to take that into consideration as they develop the proposed bylaw, but they don't have anything more at this point in time.
So she shares here that it was submitted to the Climate Action Committee in June 9th, item 6.2, staff are considering the feedback. And there's no indication what that feedback might have been, right?
Sorry, what's the question?
So she says here that they submitted it to the Climate Action Committee, our request was submitted to the Climate Action Committee as information an item on June 19th. Start considering the feedback received from. Right.
Yeah, I sent it to Chris, the corporate officer, May 7th, and then it was referred to the committee.
So I saw that it says submitted to the committee for information. I didn't read that the first time. I thought maybe there was some feedback from that committee that we could have found, but there isn't, obviously. Okay. So I was going to write a village update around it's time to start burning wood again, like we typically seem to do every other year. Fred's done one, I remember the previous mayor did one. I couldn't really write it without mentioning this, so I'll probably just write it and start off with a paragraph in the wheels of government turn slowly or something. And just leave it at that.
Except the Lions Bay.
And then mention that, do the other thing about good time to remind you, keep dry wood and all that kind of stuff. I'll get that done.
Yeah, and I think we've got some stuff on the website about...
Yeah, there's stuff on the website. Councillor Bain sent me one that he'd done before. It's all over the place. The same sort of information. I'll just write something similar, line words and all that kind of similar information. It's just a reminder. We said we were going to do that.
Okay.
Back in the spring, I think I was undertaken.
Yeah.
Recall that one. So maybe that would be not this Friday, the next Friday? Friday?
Sure.
And everything else?
I'm not sure what Mayor McLaughlin has in mind in terms of timelines and pieces and so forth.
We'll let him know that you will be writing in the not this coming village update, the following, your piece on wood burning here safely in Lions Bay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Holiday notes in earlier, or you have to miss a week?
There we go. Okay, that would conclude the unfinished business. Reports have been dealt with. No resolutions this evening to look at, no bylaws. On to correspondence, Neville.
Oh, that was quick. Can you do that first?
You got to delegate correspondence.
Yes.
Okay, so the first one is this is about let me read this. I couldn't understand my own note. I wrote there's small fee. Not sure who it's intended for. Oh, sorry, this is okay, local government event. I'm not sure if we have anyone interested in going. It's a civil ideas, civil times workshop. It's a relatively small fee. It's in Vancouver. It seems to be largely around big city issues. XXX. The last two kind of discussions, maybe something that's we might be interested in our community, but it's really largely kind of big city kind of issues. So I don't think that we need anyone to go unless anyone is interested in subject matter in downtown. Second one, Council of Councils, October 26th. This is just a notification of the Council of Councils when it's happening on Saturday. Just remind me, Peter, is this one of the ones where you don't pay a fee and Metro pays you to go? I can't remember. It is? Yeah. So I wrote here paid attendance, if anyone is interested, but I don't know what the numbers are. Should have been to one of these. Is anyone thinking of going? This Saturday.
It is this coming? No, October.
Sorry, October 26th, Saturday, October 26th, yes.
Yes, I am committed that day.
I was thinking of heading out.
You were?
Okay, excellent.
On a matter of interest, does anyone remember what the payment is?
What the what is?
You pay to attend these events, right?
No, they pay us to attend.
Yes, it's something, you would be paid to attend these events.
Yeah.
Do you remember what it is? Does anyone remember?
Not off the top of my
Matter of
head.
interest. I don't intend to go, regardless of the amount, but I was just interested to know.
I'm not sure, to be in accordance with their schedule for attendance at meetings.
Isn't it 250
under
bucks,
metros.
isn't it?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Maybe you can tell us when you go and you get your check. Just we'll know for the next one.
Okay.
Tell us what you learned.
That's what you earned,
That,
as well as what you earned.
there we go.
Okay. So I'm assuming you will just make yourself a attendant. You don't need any.
Yeah.
So the next one, this is looking for support about off-road vehicle management. It's not something that's going to affect us in Lions Bay. I don't think there's any action required. The third one is something that happened with the UCBM. I think we had a couple of these. Of course, it's a bit late because the UCBM is done. At least one of these I do remember seeing in another email was sent to us directly, but I don't think all of them were. So I don't know, Peter, maybe it's a note if there's something like this time constraint like this, maybe we can just make sure that we will get it. And I know I'd seen one of them, but I thought the other ones I hadn't seen in any of the emails as well. The one that's quite lengthy, the one about the forestry industry, about looking for support to follow the kind of Swedish model of forestry. I don't have a particular knowledge about forestry in BC and with how many different models in the world and whether the other models are much better. And I guess we don't know how it turned out. It wasn't UCB. The Rick Hansen one, number 5, that's a UCB initiative. And I don't think there was any other call for action on that one. UCBN, nothing further there. And then the last one was something about regulating single-use items. So I guess we're all kind of aware where that one went in the news with Victoria's attempts to do that. I'd be very interested to know how that turned out. I guess we could.
For the resolution or
Yeah.
the court case?
It's
Because
the
they've
court case.
they've appealed the
Okay.
court case to the Supreme Court of Canada.
Okay.
So
I guess
because it's important, because some of the statements of law and some of the other comments made by the Court of Appeal, if left to stand, actually are quite restrictive in terms of interpreting the community charter and what rights municipalities have under that piece of legislation. There are a number of assumptions that have been made over the years and interpretations with a gradual increase of and generous interpretation of the charter in favor of municipalities. This decision would pull us back several years and steps backwards. So it's everyone is applauding Victoria for appealing and hoping for the best.
Okay. Good. Thanks for that update. So, and on those general correspondence items, then there isn't really any actions that I noticed. Resident correspondence, the first one was from Mr. Roy Mathis. Comments on the view bylaw. There's two in the correspondence about that. People's concerns about their bylaw and where it may go, and they're both kind of similar themes. Concerns about how you impose rules on people on their private property. We decided in the meeting that this would be kind of shelved and discussed at the strategy committee meeting.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
These two letters here both have sort of the same angle on it, differently worded and everything. I was just wondering, does staff keep a record of all these for our strategy meeting that we're going to be discussing this in November?
Yeah, we'll have whatever information pertaining to the view bylaw in terms of pros, cons, key points for discussion purposes when we get there.
Yeah,
So Peter, I'm assuming the village update, you'd seen these and that was the reason for the village update commentary on this, or were you going to be?
Yeah, we saw the letters coming in and the apparent concern that lots of people didn't really know much about it and were concerned about it coming forward in some way without an opportunity to be consulted on it and so forth. So that's why I took the initiative to put something in the last village update to explain how it came forward and what the next steps are and what that process looks like. So I think had I not done that, we might have seen a few people here tonight to ask about it, but I think that probably appeased people in terms of understanding what the next steps are going to be, and then if there is to be further consideration of such a bylaw, that they will have plenty of opportunity to provide input and feedback. So that was the intent.
Okay. Yes, well, I think it served its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I think in our communications policy, it's meant to be the mayor that gets to do that, jump in front of things before the next council meeting.
Sorry, say again?
I think it's the mayor that's normally meant to do that. If he sees an issue that he wants to deal with before the next council meeting, he gets to do it and then come to the council meeting and say that, get it kind of ratified.
Well, I think it fits within the realm of procedural steps
Procedural
that something's going through and appropriate for the CAO to comment on, especially when the mayor's away. So
Do we feel that we should warrant a personal reply to these residents, or just to state that we are going to be visiting this in our strategic planning sessions and stay tuned?
Well, now that it's in the village update, maybe just a reference to that
Mhm.
article,
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe from that, come from the acting mayor.
certainly.
So then you've got council confirming that this is what we want to do as well.
Yep,
Well, it seems to me that we have to communicate this one pretty well, because it looks to me like this is going to be one of the bigger contentious issues we're going to be facing in the next year.
what I'm getting from both of these letters is that there is an appetite for a robust discussion on this matter from all points of view here in the village, so.
see, I would tend to suggest, with all due respect, that these indicate that people are concerned that if something like this comes forward, that they be given an opportunity to provide input.
Yes,
Not
absolutely.
necessarily that they want to have that discussion. I think the preference would be that it
Goes away.
just be shelved.
Mhm.
But if it's going to be considered, then they certainly want to have the opportunity to opine.
Yeah, and the counter side to that is another group of residents put significant work in, so they have some expectations, so
Mhm.
we've got to deal with it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, that's for another day. And then the one I jumped over was 52 Brunswick Beach. It was a resident that lives in Brunswick Beach that hadn't been here at the time of the previous discussions around the significant tree, and this resident felt the need to voice their support for the owners of 52 Brunswick and what they would like to do. I don't believe that one really had any call for action. I think it just gets added to the list of opinions on that matter. Unless anyone thinks we need to respond, I didn't.
Yeah, I
see
mean, this,
that.
this incorporates the mayor's response, so
Right. Oh, yes,
I don't know that
response
any
in the
further
word.
response is
Sorry,
necessary.
you're correct. Sorry, yeah. That is correspondence for this week.
That would conclude correspondence. Any new business? Anyone? Public questions and comments? All right, then we shall move into closed. The proposed topic for discussion in the absence of the public is legal advice, and that the meeting be closed to the public on the basis of matters to be considered under the following sections of the Community Charter. 91A, part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following: the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And section N, the consideration of whether a council meeting should be closed under a provision of this subsection or subsection 2. And council does not anticipate reconvening the open meeting for any purpose other than to adjourn the meeting generally. And I will close this portion of the meeting. Do I just reopen?
There you go. You say, and we're back.
And we're back. From our closed session, we will be adjourning this evening's meeting. Motion to adjourn. Norm? Thank you, Fred. 9:49 PM. Thank you, everyone. I hope I was somewhat competent.
You're awesome.
Oh, well, thank you. It's just been reveling in the power.